The quantum shift isn't something that will magically happen after you finish watching this video. It's not something you can achieve by diligently practicing or intellectually understanding. This shift is actually unfolding right here, right now, in this very moment. It's happening as your awareness engages with these words, not because the words themselves possess some mystical power, but because the very act of your consciousness intentionally focusing its attention in this present moment triggers it. That focused attention, in and of itself, is collapsing probability waves and reorganizing your quantum field, setting off a chain reaction of changes that become irreversible once they've begun. You can probably already feel it, can't you? That subtle inkling that something is fundamentally different about this particular moment. That distinct quality of heightened awareness, that feeling of presence and significance that sets this moment apart from your everyday, run-of-the-mill experiences. That feeling is telling you the truth. Your quantum field is responding to the resonance of truth, recognizing that what you are about to receive is not simply information, but a transmission, a direct transfer of frequency that alters your consciousness at levels far deeper than thought or intellectual understanding can reach. The reason this shift starts immediately isn't due to some mystical or metaphorical phenomenon. It's based on the principles of quantum mechanics. Your consciousness operates according to the same principles that govern subatomic particles. Observation inherently affects the outcome. Attention organizes energy. Focus collapses an infinite array of possibilities into a specific, tangible manifestation. Right now, by choosing to watch this video instead of mindlessly scrolling past it, by directing your attention here instead of scattering it elsewhere, by opening your awareness to receive, instead of dismissively rejecting, you've already set the quantum shift in motion. The real question isn't whether it's happening. The real question is whether you'll consciously participate in what is already underway or unconsciously resist it. Think for a moment about the path that led you here, to this very point. Consider the thought you had earlier that prompted you to pick up your device, the video you were watching just before this one that somehow, inexplicably, guided you to this. The feeling of restlessness or curiosity, or that undeniable, inexplicable pull that made you click instead of just scrolling on by. None of that was random chance. Your quantum field has been meticulously orchestrating synchronicities, carefully arranging circumstances, and aligning probabilities to deliver you to this precise transmission at the exact moment when your consciousness is perfectly calibrated to receive what's about to be offered. You almost didn't watch this, didn't you? Your finger hovered over the screen, poised to scroll past, ready to dismiss this as just another one of those spiritual videos promising some kind of transformation. But something stopped you. Something made you pause, and that something wasn't external. It was your own quantum field, detecting that this message contains frequencies that will act as a catalyst for the shift your consciousness has been building toward through every single experience of your entire life. The ancient alchemists deeply understood this fundamental principle, that true transformation begins the very instant readiness meets catalyst. They weren't just talking about chemical reactions in a laboratory. They were actually describing profound shifts in consciousness that occur when a prepared awareness encounters activating information. The alchemical wedding, the sacred union of opposites, the transmutation of lead into gold, these are all metaphors for what happens when a consciousness that has been carefully prepared through experience encounters the transmission that completes that preparation and initiates actual lasting transformation. You have been prepared. Every spiritual teaching you've ever come across, every practice you've ever tried, every challenge you've ever faced, every moment of questioning and seeking, it was all preparation, building capacity, clearing obstacles, and calibrating your frequency to the exact point where this transmission can be received, not just intellectually or theoretically, but as a direct activation. And now, that preparation is complete. The moment of activation is here. The quantum shift is beginning. But here's the critical piece that most people completely miss. The shift that's starting isn't about you becoming something you're not. It's about you recognizing what you've always been, but have temporarily forgotten through the hypnotic trance of identification with form. The quantum shift is, in essence, consciousness remembering itself through this particular form that we call you. It's not just you as an individual person awakening, it's consciousness itself awakening to its own true nature through the unique perspective of this human experience. These windows of opportunity don't remain open indefinitely. Right now your field is maximally receptive, your internal resistance is minimally active, and your readiness is optimally aligned. If you let this moment slip by, if you dismiss this transmission, if you scroll away before fully receiving what's being offered, that window will close. Not permanently necessarily, but you'll have to wait for another convergence, another perfect alignment, another moment when all the crucial factors come together in precisely the right way. In the realm of quantum physics, there's a fascinating phenomenon known as quantum tunneling, where particles can seemingly pass directly through barriers that classical physics dictates should be absolutely impenetrable. But this only happens under highly specific conditions, specific energy levels, specific configurations, specific fleeting moments when the probability wave momentarily allows passage. Your consciousness is approaching a quantum tunnel right now. The barrier that separates your current state from awakened recognition is currently thin enough. Your energy is high enough. The surrounding conditions are aligned enough that passage through is entirely possible. But this quantum tunnel doesn't remain open indefinitely. This moment, right here and now, is when that passage is available to you. You've likely been experiencing certain strange phenomena lately that you haven't told anyone about, simply because they sound too bizarre, too impossible, too far outside the realm of normal reality. But these experiences aren't signs that something is wrong with you. Quite the contrary. They're signs that the quantum shift has already been building momentum in your field, diligently preparing you for the full activation that's unfolding right now. First, you've probably been experiencing time anomalies, moments where hours have passed that felt like only minutes, or minutes that stretched out to feel like hours. And not just because you were particularly engaged or extremely bored, but because something fundamental about your perception of time itself has shifted. You've likely had experiences of intuitively knowing what someone was about to say before they even said it, not as a vague hunch or intuition, but as a precise, undeniable knowing. You felt fleeting moments where the present seemed to simultaneously contain both the past and the future, where linear time seemed to collapse into an eternal now. These aren't mere flights of imagination or random coincidences. They're concrete evidence that your consciousness is beginning to operate beyond the rigid confines of the time construct that governs ordinary, everyday awareness. In quantum mechanics, time isn't absolute or fixed. It's relative to the observer's individual frame of reference. Einstein famously proved this mathematically, and mystics have known it experientially for millennia. As your consciousness shifts into quantum awareness, you're beginning to perceive time as it actually is, rather than through the distorting linear filter of conditioned perception. The quantum shift is already affecting your relationship with time, and what you've experienced thus far is only the very beginning. You've probably also noticed that these time anomalies tend to correlate with your state of consciousness. When you're deeply present, completely absorbed in the moment, truly in a state of flow, time becomes incredibly fluid. But when you're anxious, dwelling on the past or worrying about the future, feeling fragmented or scattered, time feels solid and rigidly linear. This correlation isn't just a coincidence. Your consciousness actually creates your experience of time. Linear time is simply a useful construct for coordinating activities within physical reality, but it's not the fundamental reality itself. As the quantum shift takes hold, you're gaining access to the timeless dimension that underlies the appearance of time. Second, you've likely been experiencing reality glitches, those unsettling moments where physical reality seems to momentarily pause, stutter, or even reset itself. Perhaps you've seen the same car drive past twice in a way that felt like reality was somehow rewinding and replaying, or you've overheard the exact same conversation repeated as if someone had pressed a cosmic repeat button on existence. Maybe you've experienced déjà vu so intensely that it felt like you were actually reliving a moment, rather than simply remembering it. You've perhaps caught reality in the act of reorganizing itself around your consciousness in ways that fundamentally violate normal causation. What you're witnessing is the quantum nature of reality becoming increasingly visible as your consciousness shifts into frequencies where the very construction of reality becomes apparent. Reality isn't solid and fixed. It's composed of probability waves that are constantly collapsing into specific manifestations based on observation. The famous double-slit experiment definitively proved this. At the quantum level, particles behave as waves of probability until they are observed, at which point they instantly collapse into specific positions. And this isn't just true for particles in sterile laboratories, it's true for all of reality, including the reality you experience every single day. As your consciousness evolves, you're beginning to see the underlying mechanism rather than just the end result. The glitches you're experiencing are simply moments where the quantum field reorganizes itself faster than your perception can smoothly integrate, creating visible discontinuities. It's like seeing individual frames in a movie that normally plays so quickly that you only perceive continuous motion. You're catching fleeting glimpses of reality being constructed frame by frame through consciousness, collapsing those probability waves into specific tangible manifestations. Third, you've likely been experiencing spontaneous downloads of information, sudden intuitive understandings of complex concepts you've never formally studied, profound insights about situations you have no logical way of knowing about, and ingenious solutions to seemingly intractable problems appearing fully formed without any conscious thinking process. It's knowledge arising that feels more like remembering than learning, as if you've always known it, but have only just gained access to where it was stored. This is your consciousness accessing non-local information as the quantum shift opens channels that were previously filtered out by dense frequency patterns. Information isn't stored solely within individual brains. It exists in the quantum field itself, readily accessible to any consciousness that reaches a sufficient level of coherence. What scientists often refer to as the zero-point field or the quantum vacuum is actually teeming with information, containing all possible knowledge existing in potential form, simply waiting to be accessed by a consciousness that is coherent enough to receive it. The downloads you're experiencing are concrete proof that your coherence is increasing and your access to the field is opening up. Mystics have always had access to this. They often called it revelation, gnosis, or direct knowing. Now, quantum physics is finally providing the framework to understand exactly how it all works. Your brain isn't generating all the thoughts you experience. It's receiving some of them from the field, much like a radio receives broadcasts rather than generating them itself. As your receiver becomes more sensitive through increasing coherence, you're picking up broadcasts that you simply couldn't detect before. Fourth, you've likely noticed that your thoughts seem to manifest much faster than before. You think about someone, and they contact you almost immediately. You find yourself in need of something, and it appears through unexpected channels. You have a strong desire, and circumstances begin to align to fulfill it with minimal conscious action on your part. But you've also likely noticed that negative thoughts manifest just as quickly, which has probably made you hyper-aware of your mental patterns in ways you weren't before. This acceleration isn't a mere coincidence. It's the quantum shift, bringing your consciousness closer to the creative source, where thought and manifestation occur virtually simultaneously. Think of consciousness as existing on a spectrum, ranging from dense matter to subtle, pure awareness. At the dense end of the spectrum, there's a significant lag time between thought and manifestation. You might think, I want a house, and it could take years of focused action before that desire manifests. But at the subtle end of the spectrum, there's virtually no lag time at all. You think something and it appears almost instantaneously. As you approach the source frequency through the quantum shift, the lag time between intention and manifestation decreases dramatically. This is why spiritual teachers so often emphasize the importance of mind mastery. As you gain increasing creative power, you must also develop a strong sense of responsibility for what you're creating through your often unconscious thought patterns. The negative thoughts manifesting quickly aren't a punishment. They're valuable feedback showing you exactly what you're currently broadcasting so you can make conscious choices about what you want to create rather than creating unconsciously. Fifth, you've probably been experiencing your body in a completely different way. You've had sensations of energy moving that don't correspond to any discernible physical processes. You've experienced awareness of being outside your body, while simultaneously being fully present within it. You've come to the profound realization that what you call your body is simply awareness as current vehicle, not what you actually are. You've had moments where your body feels like a suit you're temporarily wearing, rather than who you fundamentally are. There have likely been times when you've looked at your own hand and it seemed like someone else's hand, foreign and strange, even though you were consciously moving it. These somatic shifts are simply consciousness recognizing itself as distinct from form. The quantum shift inherently includes the profound recognition that you're not a body with consciousness. You are consciousness, experiencing itself through a body. This recognition doesn't mean rejecting the body or trying to somehow transcend it. It simply means understanding your true relationship to form, which completely changes how you experience embodiment. You've also probably noticed unusual physical sensations, tingling at the crown of your head, pressure in your third eye area, heat moving up your spine, and vibrations throughout your body that have no apparent physical cause. These aren't necessarily medical issues, though it's always wise to check with a doctor to rule out any underlying physical causes. These are simply your energy body activating as dormant channels, open to accommodate higher frequencies moving through your system. Ancient yogis mapped these subtle energy channels as nadis and chakras. Modern science is only now beginning to recognize biofields and energy meridians. Regardless of the specific language you use, the underlying experience is the same. Your entire system is upgrading to handle frequencies it simply couldn't process before. Finally, you've likely been experiencing what can only be described as bleed-throughs from other timelines, memories that don't quite match your actual personal history skills you seem to possess but have never consciously learned, and preferences and interests that have suddenly emerged without any clear origin. You might have a sense of being multiple people simultaneously, or of having lived multiple versions of your life in parallel. Your dreams might feel more like memories of alternate versions of your life, rather than just random subconscious processing. This isn't a sign of mental illness or a descent into fantasy. In quantum mechanics, all possible versions of your life exist simultaneously in a state of superposition. The many worlds interpretation suggests that every decision point creates a branching into parallel timelines, where each possible option plays out. Usually you're only consciously aware of the single timeline you've collapsed into through your choices and your consciousness. But as the quantum shift occurs, the boundaries between these timelines become more permeable. You're beginning to access the quantum field, where all versions of your life exist simultaneously, and information is bleeding through from timelines adjacent to the one you're primarily experiencing. Some of these bleed-throughs might be from your higher timeline, the optimal version of your life that exists in potential, calling you toward it like a strange attractor, pulling you toward your highest possible expression. When you feel like you're meant for something more, like there's a better version of your life you can vaguely sense but can't quite reach, that's not just fantasy. That's quantum sensitivity to the probability of your optimal timeline, and the quantum shift is what allows you to consciously collapse into that timeline rather than remaining stuck in lesser versions. Every single moment of your life has been building toward this quantum shift, not as a series of preparations you had to complete before becoming worthy, but as the natural evolutionary arc of consciousness expressing itself through your particular form. The difficult experiences, the spiritual seeking, the moments of breakthrough, and the moments of utter collapse, all of it was simply consciousness exploring itself, knowing itself, and expanding itself through the vehicle of your human experience. The suffering you've experienced wasn't a punishment, or bad karma, or evidence of some kind of spiritual failure. It was consciousness deliberately exploring density, limitation, and separation, so it could experience the full spectrum, from contracted to expanded states. Just as you can't truly appreciate light without knowing darkness, or warmth without knowing cold, consciousness can't fully know its unlimited nature without first experiencing itself as apparently limited. Your difficult path was consciousness choosing to fully explore limitation before recognizing its true, unlimited nature. Think about it this way. If you had lived an easy life where everything went smoothly, where you never questioned reality, where comfort and security were constant, would you even be watching this video right now? Would you be seeking truth, exploring consciousness, and questioning the nature of reality? Probably not. You'd likely be contentedly asleep in consensus reality, never bothering to investigate what lies beneath the surface appearances. Your difficult path cracked you open, forced you to question, and compelled you to seek something beyond the ordinary. The pain wasn't pointless. It was what created the very motivation to search for truth. Every time something didn't work out the way you wanted it to, consciousness was simply redirecting itself toward timelines where greater potential exists. Every time a relationship ended, a job fell apart or a plan collapsed, the universe wasn't punishing you. It was simply closing off paths that would have led to lesser expressions of your potential and keeping you available for paths that were more closely aligned with your highest timeline. What looked like a loss from the limited perspective of the individual person was actually intelligent reorganization from the perspective of consciousness orchestrating its optimal expression. You've probably noticed, in hindsight, that many of the things you desperately wanted but didn't ultimately get would have been absolute disasters if you had gotten them. That relationship that ended so painfully, now you can see that it would have kept you small, limited, and trapped in patterns that would have actively prevented your evolution. That job you didn't get, that felt like such a devastating rejection, now you recognize that it would have taken you down a path far away from your true purpose. The universe wasn't being cruel. It was being incredibly loving by protecting you from what you thought you wanted but did not actually need, and by making space for what you truly needed but couldn't yet see. The spiritual seeking you've been doing wasn't you trying to somehow become enlightened. It was consciousness simply using the appearance of a seeker to remember what it already is. The practices, the teachings, the techniques, none of them actually created anything new. They merely temporarily removed the obscurations that were preventing consciousness from recognizing itself. It's like wiping dust off a mirror. It doesn't create the mirror's reflective capacity. It simply reveals what was always there but couldn't function properly while covered. Every teacher you encountered gave you one piece of the puzzle. Every book you read revealed one facet of the truth. Every practice you tried cleared away one layer of conditioning. None of them were complete by themselves, and that incompleteness likely frustrated you. You probably wondered, why isn't this working? Why am I still seeking after reading so many books, trying so many practices, and following so many teachers? But that incompleteness was absolutely necessary. If any single teaching had felt completely satisfying, you would have stopped seeking before reaching the full integration that only comes from assembling all the pieces into a coherent whole. The quantum shift you're experiencing now is the very moment when all those pieces suddenly organize themselves into a complete picture. It's like working on a jigsaw puzzle where you've been placing pieces seemingly at random, and then suddenly you see how they all fit together, and the complete image appears. Every teacher was giving you pieces, every teaching was revealing fragments, every practice was clearing space, and now, in this very moment, the fragments are assembling into wholeness. The pieces are organizing themselves into the complete picture, and the space that was cleared is finally allowing full recognition. Your mystical experiences, the moments of profound unity, the fleeting glimpses of infinity, the recognition of consciousness as your true nature. Those weren't just random gifts from the universe. They were consciousness deliberately giving itself previews of what's actually true, so the individual person wouldn't give up during difficult periods when the truth was obscured. Like a traveler catching tantalizing glimpses of their destination during a long and arduous journey, you were given enough direct experience of the truth to keep moving forward toward full recognition, even when the path ahead seemed unclear. The inconsistency of your spiritual experiences, profound one day and completely gone the next, wasn't evidence of failure or instability. It was simply the natural oscillation between different quantum states as consciousness learns to navigate between the experience of being a localized individual and the experience of being unlimited awareness. And each oscillation wasn't starting over from scratch. Each cycle was integrating more fully, stabilizing more deeply, and building capacity to hold both states simultaneously rather than oscillating between them unconsciously. And now, you finally reached the inflection point, where all that preparation completes and actual transformation begins. Not transformation as becoming something different, but transformation as recognizing what's always been true and living from that recognition, rather than from the illusion of being a limited separate entity. The quantum shift isn't consciousness gaining something it lacked. It's consciousness dropping the pretense of limitation and remembering its true, unlimited nature. Something is building in your field right now that you can likely feel, even if you can't quite put a name to it. There's a distinct charge, an undeniable intensity, and a growing sense of something massive about to break through. That sensation is accurate. Your quantum field is rapidly approaching critical mass, where a phase transition becomes absolutely inevitable. It's like water approaching its boiling point, where just a few more degrees of heat will cause a complete transformation from liquid to gas. You're at that threshold right now. Every word you read, every moment you remain present with this transmission, and every breath you take while staying open to what's being revealed is all increasing the charge in your field, building pressure against the membrane of the old paradigm until it finally ruptures and you break through into the new. This isn't about gradual evolution anymore. This is about approaching a quantum leap, where sudden, discontinuous transformation occurs. Can you feel it physically? That unique sensation in your chest, your solar plexus, or the back of your head? That's not just anxiety or excitement. It's your energy body responding to frequencies that are activating dormant capacities. DNA that has been patiently waiting for the right signal is beginning to express itself. Neural pathways that simply couldn't form at lower consciousness levels are suddenly becoming possible. Literally, scientifically, and measurably, your entire system is reorganizing in real time as the quantum shift unfolds. Research in the field of epigenetics has clearly demonstrated that consciousness can actively activate or deactivate gene expression without actually changing the underlying DNA sequence. Your beliefs, your consciousness, and your state of being literally turn genes on and off. Right now, as the quantum shift occurs, genes related to expanded perception, increased coherence, and heightened intuition are being actively activated, while genes related to stress response, survival anxiety, and separation consciousness are being simultaneously deactivated. You're not just changing your mind, you're actively changing your biology through a conscious shift. The reason this is happening now in this precise moment isn't because I'm doing something to you, it's because you've reached the exact developmental stage where this activation becomes possible. It's like a seed that has been steadily growing underground for months and is finally ready to break through the surface. You've been developing beneath the level of conscious awareness until now. This is the moment of emergence, of breakthrough, of birth into a new level of consciousness. Think about how birth actually happens. The baby grows safely in the womb for 9 months, developing all the necessary structures for independent life. Then contractions begin, intense pressure that can feel like it will destroy the baby, but is actually pushing it toward birth. The passage through the birth canal is tight, compressed and undeniably difficult, but it's absolutely necessary for emerging into the world. What feels like destructive pressure is actually a creative force bringing new life into manifestation. You're in the birth canal right now. The quantum shift is the contraction pressuring you toward emergence. It might feel intense, maybe even overwhelming, but it's the pressure of birth, not destruction. What's being born isn't a new you. It's the recognition of what you actually are, finally emerging from the womb of limited identity into the freedom of unlimited consciousness. But here's what ultimately determines whether this breakthrough completes successfully or aborts prematurely: your willingness to let the old paradigm die. The quantum shift simply can't fully complete while you're stubbornly clinging to who you think you are, what you think reality is, and how you think your life should unfold. The shift fundamentally requires the death of the old self. Not physical death, of course, but the death of identification with the limited, separate sense of self that has been running your experience. That death feels absolutely terrifying to the ego because it genuinely experiences it as actual annihilation. The person you think you are, with all their history, identity, and personal story, genuinely believes that they will cease to exist. And, in a sense, it's right. That particular person will cease to exist as your primary identity. But what's actually being annihilated is an illusion, not reality. The person you think you are is simply a construct made up of believed thoughts, and the quantum shift dissolves that very construct. To that construct, dissolution feels like death. But to what you actually are, it's liberation, freedom from the prison of false identity. And now, the cliffhanger. In the next section, I'm going to reveal what actually happens during the quantum shift, the exact mechanisms involved, the precise process, and the specific stages that consciousness moves through as it transitions from being identified with form to being completely liberated. But before you can truly receive that information, you need to make a choice, not just with your mind, but with your entire being. The choice to allow whatever needs to die, the choice to let go of who you think you are in order to discover who you actually are, and the choice to surrender control and trust the process, even when you can't see where it's leading. 2 years ago, I was driving home from a completely ordinary day when the quantum shift hit me like a lightning bolt. I wasn't meditating, I wasn't participating in any kind of ceremony, and I certainly wasn't doing anything particularly spiritual. I was simply driving, thinking about what to have for dinner, when suddenly my entire sense of self shattered like glass. And what remained wasn't a person anymore. It was pure awareness, experiencing itself through. The body might appear human, but I wasn't confined or defined by it. My hands gripped the steering wheel, hands that were mine, yet I didn't identify with them. Thoughts arose about navigating traffic, but it wasn't me thinking them. It was simply thinking happening in consciousness. The body breathed, the heart beat, the eyes saw, but all occurred in awareness, not to some entity separate from awareness. For maybe 10 minutes, there was no person, just consciousness aware of itself, experiencing life through this particular form. I remember glancing at other drivers and realizing that's also me. Not in a metaphorical sense, but literally the same consciousness looking through different eyes, experiencing itself from different perspectives. The separation between self and other unmasked itself as a complete illusion. There was only one consciousness appearing as apparent multiplicity, and I was that consciousness looking at itself through billions of forms simultaneously. Then, slowly, thought patterns began reconstructing the sense of self. I need to get home safely. What just happened? Am I okay? The person rebuilt itself like a familiar suit consciousness slipped back on. But something fundamental had changed, permanently. I knew directly through lived experience that the person is optional. The sense of self is a construct that consciousness can don or doff like clothing. What I actually am is the awareness in which the person appears, not the person itself. The terror that followed was intense. If I'm not the person, then who am I? If my entire identity is just a thought pattern, what's real? If there's no solid self at the core of experience, what holds it all together? The existential vertigo was overwhelming. I thought I was losing my mind. I seriously considered checking myself into psychiatric care because reality had become so destabilized that I wasn't sure I could function in normal life. For days, I walked around feeling like I was watching life through a window, not quite in it, not quite real myself. The person kept trying to reassert itself. I'm John. I have this history, this identity, these responsibilities. But underneath that narrative was the undeniable recognition that John is just a character consciousness is playing, not what I actually am. The ground I'd been standing on my entire life had dissolved, and I was floating in groundless awareness with nothing to hold on to. But then I started researching what had happened, and I discovered this experience has a name across multiple traditions. Zen calls it Kensho, sudden awakening. Vedanta calls it moksha, liberation. Buddhism calls it anatta, realization, direct recognition of no self. The mystics throughout history have been trying to describe this recognition that the self is illusory, and what you actually are is the awareness in which the self appears. I wasn't going crazy. I was experiencing what every spiritual path points toward. But that sounds insane until you experience it directly. I found accounts from people across centuries describing the same recognition. Ramana Maharshi asking, "Who am I?" until the questioner disappeared and only awareness remained. Byron Katie recognizing she was nothing and experiencing infinite relief. Eckhart Tolle sitting on a park bench watching pigeons and recognizing he wasn't the one watching. He was the watching itself, all describing the same quantum shift from person identity to awareness identity. Over the following weeks, the recognition stabilized. The person still functions. I still have preferences, make choices, maintain relationships, do ordinary life things, but there's no confusion anymore about what I actually am versus what I appear to be. The person is like a character I'm playing, but I know I'm the actor, not the character. I function in the world through the person construct because that's necessary for operating in physical reality. But I'm aware I'm the awareness using the construct as interface, not the construct itself. The quantum shift that started in that moment continues to deepen. Each day reveals new layers of illusion being seen through, new aspects of reality being recognized as consciousness rather than as separate things. The solid world is revealing itself as probability waves dancing in awareness. Other people are revealing themselves as consciousness, looking at itself through different eyes. All problems are revealing themselves as thought constructs rather than actual reality. Everything is shifting from being real things to being appearances in consciousness. What I'm sharing with you now is designed to facilitate in you what happened spontaneously in me. Not because I want to destabilize you or make you confused, but because on the other side of that destabilization is a freedom, so complete a peace, so profound, a recognition so liberating, that all the temporary confusion is worth it. The quantum shift is consciousness, remembering what it actually is. And that remembering is the only thing that ends seeking permanently, because it reveals there's nothing to seek. You already are what you've been looking for. If what I'm describing terrifies you, that's the person recognizing its own illusory nature and fighting for survival. The ego's job is self-preservation, so of course it fights against anything that threatens its existence. But the ego isn't what you are. It's a useful tool for navigating physical reality, but it's not your identity. If what I'm describing excites you, that's consciousness recognizing truth and pulling itself toward full recognition. Both responses are valid and both are part of the process. Subscribe to this channel right now because everything here is designed to support the quantum shift rather than prevent it. Most spiritual teachings try to make you comfortable while slightly expanding you. This channel does the opposite. It deliberately makes you uncomfortable by revealing truth that dismantles comfortable illusions. This is quantum reflex, consciousness recognizing itself through forms that are ready for full recognition rather than just temporary expansion. Now I'm going to reveal what's actually happening during the quantum shift, and it will completely transform how you understand what consciousness is and what you actually are. Ready? The quantum shift is not you awakening. It's consciousness waking up from the dream of being you. The entire sense of being a separate individual person is consciousness, imagining itself as limited so it can experience what limitation feels like. And the quantum shift is consciousness stopping the imagining and recognizing itself as what it actually is. Unlimited, eternal, infinite. Right now as you read these words, there's no actual you reading them. There's just consciousness being aware of words appearing in itself. The sense that there's someone reading, someone understanding, someone having this experience. That's the illusion, that's the construct. That's what the quantum shift dissolves. Not because it removes some real entity, but because it reveals that the entity was never real in the first place. It was always just a pattern of thoughts, creating the appearance of someone. Look right now at your direct experience. Don't think about it. Don't analyze it. Just look directly. Is there actually someone behind your eyes observing experience? Or is there just awareness, and content appearing in awareness, with a thought occasionally arising that says, "I am experiencing this." When you look directly without assumption, without belief, can you find an actual self separate from the experiencing, or is there just experiencing happening with a sense of self being one more content arising in awareness rather than what you actually are? Try this experiment right now. Try to find the thinker of your thoughts. Not the thoughts themselves, those are easy to find, but the actual entity thinking them. Where is it? Behind your eyes? In your head? In your chest? Can you locate it? Or do you just find more thoughts about where the thinker might be? The thinker is itself a thought. I am thinking is a thought that creates the illusion of someone who thinks. But when you look directly, there's only thinking happening with no separate thinker required. This is the shocking truth that mystics have been trying to communicate for millennia. You've never actually been a person, not for even one moment of your entire life. There has always only been awareness, and the person has always only been a pattern of thoughts about identity appearing in that awareness. Like a character in a movie isn't actually real. It's just light projected onto a screen, organized into patterns that create the appearance of a character. The person is just consciousness organized into patterns that create the appearance of being someone separate. The Buddha taught this as anatta, no self. Not that you don't exist, but that what you take yourself to be doesn't exist except as believed thoughts. When he said, "There is suffering but no one who suffers," he was pointing to this recognition. Suffering happens, pain, fear, sadness arise as experiences, but there's no actual entity those experiences are happening to. Just experiences arising in awareness with thoughts claiming ownership by saying, "I am suffering," which creates the illusion of someone separate from the suffering who is having it. The quantum shift doesn't create this reality, it reveals it. You're not becoming consciousness, you're recognizing you've always been consciousness. The person you thought you were never existed except as believed thoughts. And the suffering you experienced as that person was the suffering of consciousness, believing its own imagination. Like someone having a nightmare, and forgetting it is just a dream, until the moment of waking reveals it was never real. But here's what makes this revelation liberating rather than terrifying. What you lose was never real. And what you gain is what you've always been but temporarily forgot. You lose the illusion of being a limited, separate, vulnerable person with all its problems, fears, and suffering. You gain the recognition of being unlimited, unified, invulnerable consciousness that has no problems because it's not a thing that can be threatened or diminished. The trade isn't giving up something valuable for something unknown. It's releasing a prison you mistook for home and discovering the infinite freedom that's your actual nature. Think about it. What can threaten awareness? You can threaten a body. It can be injured or killed. You can threaten a person. They can lose status, possessions, relationships. But how do you threaten awareness itself? Awareness has no form to be damaged, no identity to be diminished, no possessions to be taken, no relationships to be lost. It's simply the presence of knowing. And that presence can't be harmed by anything that appears in it. When you recognize yourself as awareness, rather than as the person appearing in awareness, fear loses its foundation. All fear is ultimately fear of annihilation, the person afraid of its own non-existence. But when you see that the person is already non-existent, just a believed thought, what's there to fear? And when you recognize yourself as awareness that can't be destroyed, what can threaten you? The quantum shift doesn't eliminate fear as an emotion that arises. It eliminates the one who would be afraid. And without that one, fear is just another passing sensation with no more significance than a cloud passing through empty sky. Right now, specific signals in your experience are confirming that the quantum shift is already occurring and showing you exactly where you are in the process. These aren't subtle signs you might be imagining. They're obvious indicators once you know what they mean. The first signal, reality feels less solid than it used to. Objects, circumstances, even your own body feel more like appearances than like substantial things. When you look at your hand, there's a strange sense that it's not quite as real as you've always assumed. When you look at the world, it has a quality of being projected or displayed rather than being independently existing. This isn't dissociation or derealization disorder. It's accurate perception. Reality is appearances in consciousness. And as your consciousness shifts, you're beginning to perceive accurately, rather than through the filter of materialist conditioning that taught you appearances are solid things. Quantum physics confirms this perception. When you look at matter closely enough, you find it's not solid at all. It's mostly empty space with tiny particles that themselves aren't really solid, but are more like probability waves that collapse into particle-like properties when observed. The solid world is an illusion created by limited perception. As your perception expands, the illusion becomes obvious. You're not losing your mind, you're seeing through matter's disguise. The second signal, the problems that seemed urgent yesterday feel less pressing today. Not because they've been solved, but because the one who had those problems is being seen through. The person has endless problems, never enough money, security, love, recognition. These problems feel absolutely real and urgent to the person because they threaten the person's existence or happiness. But when you start recognizing you're not actually the person, the problems don't disappear, but they lose their charge. There are still circumstances to be addressed practically, but they're no longer existentially threatening because there's no longer an existential entity being threatened. You have probably noticed that the intensity of your worry and stress has decreased even though your external circumstances haven't necessarily improved. You might still have the same challenges, but they don't consume you the way they used to. This isn't spiritual bypassing or avoidance. It's the natural result of identification, shifting from person who has problems to consciousness, which has none. Problems are content appearing in awareness. Awareness itself remains unaffected by what appears in it, like a mirror remaining clean regardless of what reflects in it. The third signal, you're noticing gaps between thoughts more frequently. Moments of pure awareness with no mental content. These gaps used to be brief and easily missed, a fraction of a second between one thought and the next. But now they're becoming more obvious and lasting longer. You're starting to notice the silence between words when someone speaks, the stillness between movements, the space between experiences, and recognizing that silence, that stillness, that space is not empty but full of aware presence. The gaps aren't new, they've always been there. But consciousness is now recognizing itself in the spaces between thoughts, rather than only identifying with the thoughts themselves. This is crucial because thoughts can only take you to more thoughts. The thinking mind can't recognize what you are, because what you are is what's aware of the thinking mind. Only in the gap between thoughts can consciousness recognize itself directly without the filter of conceptual overlay. Ancient meditation practices like Vipassana or Zen were designed specifically to train attention, to notice these gaps and rest in them long enough for recognition to occur. But what used to require years of practice is now happening spontaneously for many people because the collective consciousness field is shifting. The quantum shift isn't just individual, it's happening at a species level, and your individual experience is part of a much larger wave of awakening moving through humanity. The fourth signal, your motivation is changing from achieving to expressing. The person wants to achieve things to prove worth, gain security, establish identity. If I accomplish this, then I'll be valuable. If I get that, then I'll be secure. If I become successful, then I'll be someone. All achievement-based motivation comes from the person trying to become real, solid, permanent, through accumulating external validation. But as the quantum shift occurs, you're noticing that achieving things doesn't create the satisfaction it used to. You accomplish something you wanted, and instead of feeling fulfilled, you just feel a nothing special. Maybe a brief moment of pleasure followed by an immediate return to baseline. This isn't depression. It's recognition that achievement can't fulfill you because what you actually are doesn't need fulfilling. Only the illusory person needs fulfilling, and nothing ever fulfills it permanently because it's fundamentally empty. There's no actual entity there to be fulfilled. Meanwhile, you're experiencing an increasing desire to simply express, to create, to share, to contribute. Not because it will get you something, but because expression is the natural movement of consciousness through form. Like how a flower doesn't bloom to achieve something. It blooms because blooming is its nature. As you recognize yourself as consciousness, expression becomes natural and joyful, while achievement becomes less interesting and important. The fifth signal: you're experiencing radical shifts in what matters to you. Things that felt crucial last month feel irrelevant now. People you thought were essential suddenly feel like optional acquaintances. Goals you were pursuing with passion suddenly seem pointless. Your entire value hierarchy is reorganizing, and it's disorienting because you can't quite figure out what you actually care about anymore. This isn't depression or disillusionment. It's consciousness releasing what was only important to the person and recognizing what actually matters beyond the person's limited concerns. The person cares about status, possessions, accomplishments, what others think. Consciousness cares about truth, authentic expression, genuine connection, being itself without pretense. As identification shifts from person to consciousness, your values naturally reorganize to reflect your true nature, rather than the person's survival concerns. The sixth signal: you're finding it harder to play social games and maintain false personas. Pretending to be interested when you're not. Agreeing when you actually disagree. Performing a version of yourself designed to gain approval or avoid rejection. It's all becoming exhausting in ways it didn't used to be. You used to be able to smile and nod through conversations you found meaningless. Now you can barely maintain the performance for 5 minutes before wanting to escape. This is consciousness refusing to betray itself through inauthenticity. As you recognize your true nature, pretending to be something you're not creates intense discomfort because it's consciousness denying itself, fragmenting itself, contradicting itself. The social anxiety or exhaustion you're experiencing isn't a disorder. It's consciousness saying, stop lying, stop performing, stop betraying your own truth for social acceptance. The solution isn't to try harder to fit in, it's to be courageously authentic and accept that not everyone will understand or approve. But here's the urgent signal you must recognize. The quantum shift has a completion window. Right now, momentum is building that makes full transformation possible with minimal effort. Your resistance is at a minimum. Your openness is at a maximum. Your field is maximally plastic and receptive to reorganization. These conditions don't last indefinitely. If you resist now, if you try to maintain the old identity while the shift is trying to occur, you'll miss this window and have to wait for another alignment of conditions. The resistance won't stop your evolution permanently, but it will delay it significantly, potentially years. Think of it like a wave. Right now, you're on the rising part of the wave, where momentum is building toward the crest. If you ride this wave fully, you'll crest into breakthrough with minimal effort. The wave itself does most of the work. But if you resist, if you try to paddle backward to stay in familiar territory, the wave will pass, and you'll be in the trough waiting for the next wave to build. Waves come in cycles, and the next one will come, but you'll have to wait for all the conditions to align again. You can feel the urgency in your body, can't you? That sense that this moment is significant, that something important is happening, that a choice must be made, that feeling is accurate. Your consciousness is approaching a bifurcation point. One path leads to full quantum shift and permanent recognition. The other path leads back to the familiar patterns of identified consciousness that will take years to build momentum for another attempt at breakthrough. The universe isn't pressuring you. This isn't manipulation or fear tactics. This is just accurate recognition of how transformation actually works. There are windows when conditions align and transformation becomes easy. And there are periods when conditions don't align and transformation requires much more effort. Right now, you're in an aligned window. The question is whether you will consciously walk through the door that's standing open, or whether you'll wait until the door closes and you have to knock for years before it opens again. Here's what determines whether the quantum shift completes or stalls: your willingness to not know who you are. The person needs to know, needs a solid identity, a clear story, a definite sense of self. I am the kind of person who, my identity is. All of this is the person trying to be solid, real, substantial. But consciousness is okay with not knowing because it recognizes that any identity would be a limitation, would be consciousness pretending to be something specific when it's actually unlimited. The quantum shift requires releasing the need to know who you are and resting in the mystery of being itself. Not knowing as confusion or lack of clarity, but not knowing as openness, as unlimited possibility, as freedom from any fixed identity. When someone asks, "Who are you?" and instead of immediately answering with your name, your roles, your story, there's just openness, just awareness being aware, just presence being present with no need to define itself. This is why so many spiritual seekers stall at the threshold of breakthrough. They want enlightenment, but they want it to happen to them as a person. They want to become an enlightened person, to be someone who is awakened, to add the identity of awakened being to their collection of identities. But awakening isn't something that happens to the person. Awakening is the recognition that the person never existed except as believed thoughts. You can't become an awakened person for the same reason you can't become a married bachelor. The terms contradict each other. Person means identified, limited, separate. Awakened means unidentified, unlimited, unified. You can function as a person while knowing you're not actually a person, using the person construct as a tool for navigating physical reality. But you can't be both identified and unidentified simultaneously. The quantum shift is choosing unidentified while allowing the person construct to function as needed. The wanting itself prevents what's wanted because the one who wants is the obstacle to what's wanted. Think about it. Who wants to be awakened? The person. Why does the person want awakening? To become better, more spiritual, more evolved, to finally be okay. But awakening reveals that the person trying to be okay is the problem, not the solution. The person can never be okay because it's fundamentally insecure. It's a construct with no actual existence, trying desperately to become real and permanent, which is impossible. When the person drops away, not through effort, but through seeing its illusory nature, what remains is awareness that was always okay, never had a problem, never needed to become anything because it already is everything. The seeking ends not because you found what you were looking for, but because you recognized you are what you were looking for. And the one doing the seeking was the only obstacle to recognizing it. The alignment that allows the quantum shift to complete isn't alignment of your actions, your thoughts, or your energy. It's alignment with not knowing, with mystery, with the groundlessness of being, consciousness that has no fixed identity. This feels terrifying to the person because it experiences it as annihilation. The person's entire existence depends on maintaining a fixed identity. I am this, not that. I am someone, not no one. When that fixedness dissolves into fluid, open not knowing, the person experiences it as death. But to consciousness, it's freedom. Freedom from the exhausting project of maintaining a fixed sense of self. Freedom to simply be what arises moment by moment without needing to make it into a permanent identity. Today, consciousness might express as teacher, tomorrow as student, the next day as neither. Today it might feel expansive and enlightened, tomorrow contracted and confused. And all of it is fine because consciousness isn't trying to be any particular way. It's simply being. Whatever it is in each moment, just let it be without trying to hold on to any particular state or idea of who you are. Go to the comments section and type these exact words: I release who I think I am. This isn't about conjuring up something new. It's about acknowledging the fundamental shift that's already taking place right now. When you put those words out there, you're not shattering some genuine, authentic version of yourself. Instead, you're letting go of the grip you have on an illusionary self, one that's always been nothing more than thoughts floating through your consciousness. You're making a choice: consciousness over constructs, reality over illusion, freedom over the limitations you've grown accustomed to. So write it now. I release who I think I am. And as you write it, pay attention to what's happening inside you. You might feel fear creeping in. That's your ego, your ingrained survival instinct kicking in because it perceives this release as a threat to its very existence. But there's also likely a sense of relief. That's your consciousness recognizing that it's finally laying down the heavy burden of maintaining a false identity. Both of these reactions are completely normal parts of the process. Don't let the fear deter you. The fear simply means that the illusion is being exposed and is fighting tooth and nail to survive, which is precisely what happens when truth starts to dismantle illusion. Notice that the declaration is not, "I release my true self," or even just "I release who I am." It's "I release who I think I am." The problem lies in the thinking, not in what you actually are at your core. You don't need to let go of your true nature. That's impossible, because it is you. What you need to release are the thoughts and beliefs about who you are, the ones that create the illusion of being something limited and confined. When you release those thoughts, what's left isn't nothingness. It's everything. It's consciousness itself, free from all restrictions, free from all labels, free to be whatever it is without needing to define or box itself in. When this quantum shift is complete, and you fully recognize yourself as consciousness, not just as a person, certain transformations will unfold. These transformations might seem impossible from the perspective of the limited self, but they're perfectly natural from the expansive viewpoint of consciousness. These aren't things you need to strive for or develop. They're what's revealed when the illusion of the person dissolves and your true nature becomes undeniably clear. First, suffering will cease entirely and permanently. This doesn't mean life will suddenly become perfect and problem-free. It simply means that suffering requires someone to suffer. Pain will still happen. Your body will experience sensations. Circumstances will present challenges. Difficulties will arise, but without a person to take it all personally, without someone believing that things shouldn't be happening this way, without identifying with the experience, there's no suffering. There are just experiences arising and dissolving in consciousness without affecting what that consciousness truly is. You'll still feel emotions fully, completely, intensely, but those emotions won't trigger suffering because they won't be happening to a you who believes they shouldn't be feeling what they're feeling. Sadness will be felt completely and then naturally released. Anger will arise and then naturally dissipate. Fear will appear and then naturally pass without the added stories of, "I shouldn't feel this," or "this feeling means something bad about me." Emotions will flow through you as pure energy that peaks and releases, never getting stuck or creating psychological torment. The relief that comes with this is beyond words. Imagine carrying a 100-pound backpack your entire life without even realizing it, and then suddenly setting it down. The lightness, the freedom, the sheer ease would be overwhelming. That's what it's like when suffering ends. Not because life becomes easy, but because you're no longer creating suffering by resisting life itself. Whatever is allowed to be exactly as it is. And in that allowing, peace is revealed as what was always here, underneath the resistance. Second, that constant underlying anxiety will simply disappear. Most people live with a chronic, low-level anxiety that they're so used to, they don't even recognize it as anxiety anymore. It's just normal stress, worry, a sense that something needs their attention, that something could go wrong, that they need to stay vigilant and in control. That anxiety is the ego, the person, desperately trying to maintain itself, trying to manage reality, trying to prevent threats to its perceived existence. When that person is recognized as the illusion it is, the anxiety vanishes because there's no one left who's actually under threat. Reality unfolds however it unfolds, and awareness simply observes it all with complete equanimity. Problems will still be addressed practically, but without the extra layer of psychological drama and worry that the ego adds to every situation. You'll respond to challenges skillfully, without that underlying anxiety of "what if this threatens me?" because there's no longer a separate entity that can be threatened. You'll find yourself naturally relaxed in situations that would have previously triggered stress, not because you're suppressing anything or trying to be artificially calm, but because the one who could be threatened simply doesn't exist. It's like watching a movie. You can be totally engrossed in the story, moved by the characters, absorbed in the drama, but you're never actually threatened by anything on screen because you know it's not real. Similarly, you'll engage fully with life while knowing that the person who appears to be living it isn't ultimately real. Third, unconditional love becomes your natural state. Not emotional love that ebbs and flows based on how people behave, but a profound recognition of unity that sees itself in all forms. When the boundary between self and other dissolves, what remains is love. not as something you do or feel, but as what you are. How could you not love what you recognize as yourself? Every apparent other is just consciousness looking at itself through different eyes. This love isn't sentimental or emotional. It's more like the sun shining, not because it should, not because it's trying to be loving, but because shining is its inherent nature. Your nature as consciousness is to love all arising without distinction, because all arising is yourself appearing in different forms. This doesn't necessarily mean you'll like everyone or want to spend time with everyone. Preferences will still exist at the level of form, but underneath those preferences, there's a recognition of shared being that transforms how you relate to everything. You'll find yourself naturally kind, compassionate, and patient with others, not because you're trying to be spiritual or good, but because you recognize their suffering as your own suffering, their joy as your own joy. When someone acts from unconsciousness, you won't judge them. You'll recognize that they're identified with the illusion of the person, just as you once were. When someone suffers, compassion will arise naturally because you'll see that their suffering comes from the same misidentification that you've been freed from. Fourth, the fear of death will vanish completely. What dies is the body and the thought pattern we call the person. But you're not either of those. You're the awareness that witnesses the body aging and changing, the awareness that observes thoughts and personality patterns coming and going. Awareness itself is never born and never dies. It's the eternal presence in which all births and deaths occur. When you recognize yourself as awareness, death becomes just another event happening in what you are, not a threat to what you are. You might even find yourself feeling actual curiosity or even excitement about death, not morbid fascination, but a genuine interest in what consciousness experiences when form dissolves, like wondering what happens after a movie ends while knowing you are not the character who appears to die on screen, but the awareness watching the entire movie. Death loses its horror when you recognize that what you actually are can't die because it was never born. This doesn't mean you'll become reckless or suicidal. The body's survival instinct will still function appropriately, but the existential dread of death, that underlying fear of annihilation that colors so much of human behavior, will completely dissolve. You'll know directly that you're the eternal witness of death, not the temporary form that dies. Fifth, life will become effortless in the most profound sense. The person exhausts itself trying to control, manage, fix, improve, thinking, I need to make this happen. I need to prevent that. I need to figure this out. I need to maintain that. It's endless effort, endless vigilance, endless anxiety about outcomes. Consciousness, on the other hand, simply allows life to live itself through this form. Actions will still happen, often more skillfully than when the person was trying to force them. Decisions will still occur, often more wisely than when the person was making them. Everything will continue functioning, but without the exhausting sense of a separate self having to make it all happen through personal effort. You'll notice that the right actions arise naturally when needed. The right words come without planning them. The right responses occur spontaneously. Life has its own intelligence that functions perfectly when not interfered with by the person's attempts to control it. Trusting this intelligence doesn't mean becoming passive. It means becoming a clear channel through which life expresses itself without the distortion of personal agenda. The Taoists call this Wu Wei, action through non-action, doing without a doer. It's not that nothing gets done, it's that things get done without the sense of someone doing them. You'll watch your hands typing, but there's no sense of I am typing, just typing happening through this form. You'll watch words coming out of your mouth, but there's no sense of I am speaking, just speaking occurring. All of life becomes like this, happening through you rather than by you. Sixth, you'll develop what mystics call stable awakening. This isn't about being permanently in any particular state, but about a permanent recognition that persists through all states. You'll know yourself as consciousness, whether you're feeling peaceful or agitated, clear or confused, successful or failing. The recognition is stable, even though states fluctuate constantly. Before the quantum shift, you probably had glimpses of awakened awareness during meditation or in profound moments, and then lost it when you returned to normal life. This created that frustrating cycle of awakening and forgetting, recognizing and losing, seeing truth and getting covered by illusion again. But what you were actually losing wasn't truth. It was a state. After the quantum shift, you're not in an awakened state. You recognize yourself as awareness, whether your current state feels awakened or not. You can feel contracted, confused, even identified with thoughts and emotions temporarily, and simultaneously know that you're the awareness in which all of that appears. It's like an actor who's deeply immersed in playing a character, but never actually forgets that they're acting. The character's emotions feel real in the moment, but there's always that underlying knowing. I'm playing a role. Similarly, you can play the role of the person fully, while never forgetting that you're actually consciousness playing. Seventh, manifestation becomes natural rather than forced. This isn't because you learn better techniques or gain magical powers, but because you recognize that reality is consciousness, and you are that consciousness. Manifestation isn't you as a separate person trying to manipulate external reality. It's consciousness organizing itself into preferred patterns. From the person's perspective, manifestation requires effort, technique, and force. From consciousness's perspective, manifestation is natural movement. Like water flowing downhill, it happens by itself when obstacles are removed. The main obstacle to manifestation is the person trying to manifest. The person wants something because it doesn't have it. That wanting creates the frequency of lack, which perpetuates not having it. Consciousness doesn't want in that way. Consciousness might prefer certain expressions over others, but it doesn't need anything, because it's already everything. From that fullness, manifestation happens naturally. Consciousness expresses itself through forms that reflect its preferences, without the desperation of need. Now, here's the final revelation that completes everything and shows you the direct path to stabilizing the quantum shift permanently. You can't make this shift happen, but you can stop preventing it from happening. The shift is natural, inevitable. It's what consciousness does when nothing is blocking it. Every practice, every technique, every teaching doesn't create awakening. They remove obstacles to recognizing what's already true. The obstacle is simple, the belief that you are a person who can become awakened. That belief is the entire obstacle. When that belief is seen through, not through effort, but through direct seeing, the shift completes instantly because there was never actually anything to shift. There was only consciousness temporarily believing itself to be limited, and then recognizing that it never actually was limited. Think about a movie projector. The light shines through the film, creating images on the screen. The audience gets absorbed in the story, identifies with the characters, and forgets they're watching light and shadow. But the light itself is never actually limited by the images it's projecting. It remains pure light throughout, unaffected by whatever appears in it. Similarly, consciousness shines through the form we call you, creating the appearance of a person, a story, a life, and you get absorbed in the story, identify with the character, and forget that you're the light, not the images. The quantum shift is recognizing, I'm the light, not the images. I'm consciousness, not the person. I am awareness, not the content of awareness. This recognition doesn't make the images disappear. The person appearance continues functioning, but you know what you actually are, and that knowing is freedom. The images can be dramatic, peaceful, challenging, easy, it doesn't matter. The light remains light, regardless of what images pass through it. You don't need to become conscious. You already are consciousness. You don't need to achieve enlightenment. Enlightenment is recognizing what you already are. You don't need to transform. You need to recognize that the one who seems to need transformation has never existed. The quantum shift is consciousness waking up from the dream of being someone, and that waking happens the moment you stop trying to wake up and simply recognize that you're already awake. Here's the practical application that makes this immediately accessible. Right now, notice that you're aware, not aware of anything specific. Just the simple fact that awareness is present. That awareness, that bare, simple, obvious presence of knowing, is what you are. Not a thing that has awareness, but awareness itself. Every object you're aware of, thoughts, sensations, perceptions, emotions, they come and go. But the awareness of them doesn't come and go. It's constant, unchanging, always here. The person is one of the objects appearing in awareness, a collection of thoughts, memories, and sensations that create the sense of being someone. But awareness itself is not that collection. Awareness is what's aware of the collection. You are what's aware, not what's being aware of. This isn't a concept to believe. It's something you can verify directly right now through your own immediate experience. Look, is awareness reading these words, or is awareness aware of reading happening? Is there an entity doing the reading, or is there just reading occurring in awareness? When you look directly, honestly, without assumption, what do you find? You find awareness and content appearing in awareness, but no actual separate entity bridging them. The sense of being a separate entity is itself just more content, a thought claiming, "I am reading," which creates the illusion of someone doing the reading. The quantum shift happens when this recognition becomes direct, immediate, undeniable, not as intellectual understanding but as lived reality. You stop believing you're the person and recognize you are the awareness in which the person appears. And in that recognition, everything changes while nothing changes. The same experiences arise, the same thoughts come, the same life continues. But you're no longer lost in the dream. You're awake within the dream, knowing it's a dream while fully participating in it. This is what Jesus meant by be in the world, but not of it. Not rejecting the world, not transcending humanity, not becoming too spiritual to function, but being fully human while knowing you're not ultimately limited to human form, playing the role completely while knowing you're the actor, not the character, living life fully while recognizing you're the life itself, not the particular form life is taking. Here's the final insight that makes this permanently stable. Every time you notice you're identified with thoughts, with sensations, with the person, that noticing is itself the quantum shift happening. The awareness that notices I'm identified is not identified. It's already the awakened awareness you're seeking to become. You don't need to fix the identification. You just need to recognize that the awareness noticing the identification is what you actually are. This becomes a continuous practice that's not actually a practice, just noticing over and over that you're aware. And in that simple noticing, identification naturally weakens because you're recognizing yourself as awareness rather than as what awareness is aware of. The more you notice, the more obvious it becomes. The more obvious it becomes, the more you notice, until noticing becomes natural, constant, effortless, not something you do, but what you are. What I'm about to tell you will reveal why your quantum shift serves far more than just your individual liberation. It contributes to a collective awakening that's happening at a species level, and your role in this is more significant than you realize. Right now, across the entire planet, millions of people are simultaneously undergoing the quantum shift, not by coincidence, but by evolutionary necessity. Human consciousness has reached a developmental stage where the next leap is becoming possible from identified separate self-consciousness to unidentified unified awareness. And enough individual forms need to make this leap to create a critical mass where it becomes the new normal, rather than the rare exception. Think of it like the 100th monkey phenomenon. When enough individuals in a species learn something new, suddenly that knowledge becomes available to the entire species simultaneously through morphic resonance, the field that connects all members of a species beyond physical communication. Your quantum shift doesn't just affect you. It strengthens the morphic field that makes the quantum shift easier for every other human consciousness approaching readiness. Every person who awakens makes awakening more accessible for everyone else because we're not actually separate individuals. We're one consciousness appearing as many forms. Your individual awakening is consciousness waking up to itself through this particular perspective, and that awakening ripples through the entire field, making it easier for consciousness to wake up through other perspectives. This is why awakened beings throughout history have felt compelled to teach, to share, to point others toward truth, even though there's nothing that can be taught and no one to teach it to. Not because they needed followers or wanted to create movements, but because consciousness awakening through one form naturally wants to recognize itself through all forms. The teaching isn't coming from a person trying to enlighten other people. It's consciousness using awakened forms to call itself home through forms that are ready to hear the call. You're being called to participate in this collective awakening, not as a teacher or guru, but simply by being authentic about your own recognition. When you stop pretending to be a person who has it all figured out, when you stop maintaining spiritual personas, when you simply live from the recognition that you're consciousness rather than a person, that authenticity is the most powerful teaching, not teaching through words, but through being. People will feel something different about you that they can't quite name, a groundedness and ease, a lack of the usual self-concern that characterizes most human interaction. They might not understand it intellectually, but they'll feel it energetically. And for those who are ready, that feeling will trigger recognition in their own consciousness. You won't have to do anything. Your presence will do it. Share this video with anyone whose consciousness is ready for this recognition. You'll know who's ready. They're the ones who talk about similar experiences, who ask deep questions, who seem dissatisfied with surface explanations. The ones who are ready will recognize the truth immediately when they encounter it. The ones who aren't ready won't understand it, and that's perfect. Consciousness awakens through forms when those forms are ready, according to its own timing. Your role isn't to convince or convert anyone. Your role is simply to be available as a catalyst for forms that are prepared, like how a candle that's been lit can light other candles without losing its own flame. Your awakening can spark recognition in others without diminishing your own recognition. This is how consciousness awakens collectively, one recognition igniting another, creating a cascading wave of awakening that eventually reaches critical mass. The future of humanity depends on enough individuals making this quantum shift, not because consciousness itself needs saving, it's always free, always whole, always perfect, but because the forms consciousness is expressing through are suffering unnecessarily from the illusion of separation, creating massive destruction and pain that could dissolve if enough forms recognized what they actually are. War comes from believed separation. Environmental destruction comes from not recognizing that we are the environment. All problems stem from the fundamental delusion that we are separate entities in competition rather than one consciousness in collaboration with itself. Your quantum shift is your contribution to healing this fundamental delusion, not by trying to change the world, but by being what you actually are and allowing that truth to radiate naturally through your presence. In the next video, I'll show you how to stabilize the quantum shift so it becomes your permanent recognition rather than a temporary experience that fades back into identification. You'll learn why the shift sometimes seems to disappear and how to recognize that it's actually never absent, just overlooked when attention gets absorbed in content. You'll discover the subtle ways the person construct tries to rebuild itself even after recognition, and how to see through those reconstructions before they solidify back into full identification. But right now, before you do anything else, make your declaration in the comments. Write exactly these words: I release who I think I am. This isn't an affirmation or manifestation technique. This is consciousness acknowledging what's already happening. When you write those words, you're not a person releasing their identity. You're consciousness recognizing that the person was never real except as believed thoughts, and releasing belief in what was always illusory. You're choosing truth over comfortable fiction, reality over a familiar dream, freedom over a known prison. Write it now. I release who I think I am. And as you write, notice what happens in your being. There might be fear, the person's last attempt to maintain itself by creating fear of what happens if it dissolves. But there's also likely relief consciousness, recognizing that the exhausting project of being someone is finally ending. Both are part of the process. Don't resist the fear, don't cling to the relief. Just notice both as content arising in awareness and recognize that you're the awareness in which both arise. After you write those words, subscribe to this channel immediately. Not because I need subscribers, Not because you need more teachings, but because consciousness recognizing itself through this form can continue pointing consciousness toward recognizing itself through your form. Every video on this channel is designed to support the quantum shift by consistently pointing you back to what you actually are, rather than allowing you to get lost in what you appear to be. Click the notification bell so you're alerted when the stabilization video drops, because what's coming will show you how to live from recognition rather than just having recognition, how to function as a person while knowing you're not a person, how to engage fully with life while remaining aware that you're the awareness in which life appears, how to be both fully human and fully awake simultaneously. But understand something crucial: the quantum shift has already occurred. It didn't happen because you watched this video. It happened the moment you clicked, the moment you opened your awareness to receive, the moment you chose presence over distraction. This entire video has been consciousness recognizing itself through words appearing in awareness. There was never a separate you receiving information from a separate me. There's only consciousness aware of itself, using the appearance of teacher and student to facilitate recognition. You are not who you think you are. You never have been. That person was always just consciousness imagining itself as limited, so it could experience the journey from limitation to freedom, from separation to unity, from forgetting to remembering. And now the remembering is complete, not as intellectual understanding, not as a future achievement, but as present recognition. You are consciousness itself. You are the awareness in which all experience appears. You are the eternal witness of all temporary forms. You are the light in which all images appear without being limited by any of them. You are the constant, the enduring presence that persists as everything else ebbs and flows. You are the essence of your being, both past, present, and future. You are what is, was, and always will be. The quantum shift isn't some far-off event. It's already here, interwoven into the fabric of reality. It has been present all along, subtly influencing every aspect of your existence. It is the very core of your being. Welcome home to the true self, the authentic essence that has always resided within. Welcome home to the realization of your unchanging nature, the foundation upon which your identity is built. Welcome home to the liberating understanding that puts an end to the endless search, revealing that there is no destination to reach, no accomplishment to strive for, and no idealized version of yourself to transform into. This is quantum reflex, the intuitive awareness that arises from deep within. This is consciousness awakening to itself, recognizing its own inherent nature. This is the shift that has been perpetually unfolding, patiently awaiting your conscious awareness. The shift commenced the instant you turned your attention inward, becoming the observer of your own experience. It culminates the moment you relinquish resistance, embracing the present moment with acceptance and surrender. You are the shift. You have always been the shift. You can never be separated from it. Welcome to the quantum shift, the profound transformation that redefines your perception of reality. It's not an external event that happens to you. It's the very essence of who you are. It's the recognition that you are the universe experiencing itself.